What's up, welcome back to Nostalgia. Dave here in our podcast. What's going on in pop culture right now? Got a big, packed episode this week. A ton of movies. It's movie season. I love it when the fall comes around and I'm just at the theater all the dang time. And that's going to continue, and just so stay tuned for that. But this week we have Springsteen, Deliver Me From Nowhere, Bugonia, and The Mastermind, all in the theater. A House of Dynamite on Netflix, 4 films. Also, the conclusion of Gen V Season 2 on Amazon Prime Video, and the new Sserafim single album, Spaghetti. A lot to get to. Make sure you subscribe. YouTube.com/nostalgiapod. Linktree.com/nostalgiapod. See the links below. Get the best of 2025 Spotify playlist linked below. Let me know it's good, and let's get into it, because we got a lot to talk about here. What's up? Welcome back to Nostalgia. Dave here with a review of Sserafim's single album, Spaghetti. Sserafim back with their second release of the year following the Hot EP earlier in the year. And now they're back, and I had never been the biggest fan of the single album as a concept. They put out 2 songs. They put out a single. Like the single album branding in K-pop I always found a little weird. And it's been disappointing to only release 2 new songs here, after releasing an EP. After releasing an EP before that, last year. The slow drip of music. It's a bit frustrating at times, but I gotta say, Sserafim's Spaghetti is a lot bolder and out of left field than I expected. The chorus melody is very reminiscent of the group's song Crazy. I do think there's a bit of inspiration from Cat's Eyes Gnarly with these kind of out of left field lyrics, like Bad Bitch in Between Your Teeth. However, I do find that Eat It Up refrain incredibly repetitive and grating. J-Hope of BTS sounds great on this beat. In fact, I think his verse would have not sounded out of place on his album Jack in the Box. However, the concept of this song is just a bit too silly for me, but I appreciate it being something kind of out there. And the second song, Pearlies, I think this is just a better song overall, even if maybe it's not as ambitious. I like the casual singing. There's a little bit of light hip-hop flows, which Sserafim don't do too often. I think it's a pretty strong, B-side track from them. Overall, though, it's hard to get too excited about one-off singles like this. I still remain kind of a album and project type person, and when something's so svelte, they put all this hype and marketing and visual product into making these 2 tracks, right? Getting a J-Hope feature, releasing these songs in English, in a version without any features. It's just, there's all this packaging, but what is it for exactly? And, Sserafim, we talked about earlier this year with Hot, they're a group that continues to, in a sense, throw paint at the wall. They're going all over the place with different genre experimentations, and they seem to be very reactive to various types of trends, and am I a bit surprised to see something so clearly indebted to Cat's Eyes Gnarly, a song in and of itself that was quite polarizing? I am. Then again, Cat's Eye is also under the Hype umbrella, like Sserafim. Maybe I shouldn't be too shocked. Honestly, I think my favorite moment on this single album is on verse 2 of Pearlies. I think Kazuha sounds really great. I love her flow over that tempo. I think she sounds great, and she's pretty noticeable on Spaghetti as well, and I think she's really coming into her own more as a vocalist. She's definitely been kind of more of a background player on most Sserafim music, with, of course, Chaewon and Yoonjin carrying those vocals, as we know, most of the time. Not necessarily the case this time around, though, and that's worth something. But yeah, honestly, not too much to dig into beyond that. I respect the attempt, but I think Pearly is actually pretty solid. Let me know, though, what did you think? Do you like Spaghetti? Does this work for you? Are you happy with this swing? Let me know. And for more music reviews, more K-pop reviews, subscribe. And I'll see you next time. What's up? Welcome back to Nostalgia. Dave here with a review of Gen V Season 2. The Boys spin-off series on Amazon Prime Video has concluded its second season, which of course is taking place in between the previous season of The Boys, Season 4, and is now directly tying into the 5th and final season of The Boys that we know we will be getting next year. That is a series that has completed filming already. And I think Gen V Season 2 was very successful. I think this was a level up season in many respects because there's a lot of really compelling character progression in Season 2, particularly with the Marie character. Lizzie Broadway as Emma remains the MVP of the series for me. I also think the character of Jordan continues to be used very well. And while Gen V and the Boys is no longer surprising for its relevance to our current social and political climate, it continues to make astute observations. It continues to be an action-packed and flashy show with its production, with the way it communicates that action. And with Season 2, this feels like a meaningful and impactful spin-off and an essential piece of that boys' storytelling. And that's exactly what you want with a spin-off series. Whether Gen V actually returns for a third season, with it now clearly directly tying into the last season of The Boys, I'm not sure. But I think this was a really satisfying and well-constructed season. Now, one of the things I really enjoyed about what Season 2 did to start was very quickly getting us back to Godolphin University, getting us back to God-U, and getting us back to that concept of this being a team, a fledgling new team of students, and the concept of superhero college. And that was just such a great, high concept idea for a spin-off in the Boys universe. And we got a lot of that done really well in that first season. But the end of the first season, of course, took us to Elmira, took us away from that core setting. I was really happy we got back to that, and I thought Hamish Linklater's presence as the villain Cypher for the majority of the season was a great way to kind of get us back there. That character used as a sort of Dolores Umbridge at Hogwarts type storytelling device in Harry Potter. I like the combat training that Cypher was doing to try and build people up, particularly his interest in Marie. I liked all that as a construction, and I thought that was a great way to bring the characters together and still stick to that core Gen V, ethos, what this show has kind of been about, what makes it different. And as I said, I liked Hamish Linklater as that lead villain. Of course, we learn a lot more about what the true origins, the true motivations of Cypher towards the end of the season. But for our initial understanding of the character, I think that was working quite well. Now, obviously, what happens at the end of the penultimate episode and the main focus of the finale is, of course, the true nature of the founder of the university, Godolphin himself, played by Ethan Slater. And when we saw that original flashback to kick off Season 2, and you could see that Slater was playing the character, I kind of had in the back of my mind the entire time, I was like, oh, interesting that they would actually cast someone, kind of famous, well-known, of course, part of the Wicked ensemble, for example, to cast someone like that to play this character if they weren't going to come back. So it kind of made sense, and it was kind of maybe easy to see that the old, very heavily burned hyperbaric chamber laying person in Cypher's home was, in fact, Godolphin. Now, what I was not expecting was that Godolphin was actually the puppet master of everything the entire time, pulling the strings with his powers, and Cypher was just a construction and really an innocent bystander in the whole thing. I thought all of that was pretty cool. I was also pretty certain that the finale of the second season would dispense with the threat, right? Godolphin was not going to do something in one episode and then be the big bad going into a third season or something. That just didn't feel like where we were going. So the fact that he was taken out by all of the Gen V ensemble that we know, I think that makes a lot of sense and was a final payoff for the arc that's happened with the Marie character, where she has really developed into a powerful soup and gone on quite the emotional progression as well. I think Jazz Sinclair did a really nice job this season. I think this was a character that was a bit more up and down in the first season and a lot more consistent this time around. And they were able to play off, the presence of Cypher and then later Godolphin pretty well to build her up as the true lead of the show. I think my biggest beef with how that character was used was I just didn't think the relationship with Jordan was given enough time. That felt a bit rushed, and then it kind of concludes, or Jordan doesn't want to stay together anymore, want to just be friends type thing. That all felt a little neat and a little packed in. We'll see if they're able to color that in a little bit in the future. I'm not sure. Didn't think that was the strongest material. As I said, though, I love Lizzie Broadway as Emma, and while Emma gets less of lead plots and a lot of her own stuff this time around, I think she was more of a separate and outstanding part of the ensemble in season 1. She's really just kind of part of the core group the majority of the time with season 2. The performances is, I think, really great. The character itself is really great. The way it adds a lot of, I think, levity and lightness to generally pretty dour and dark circumstances that we come to expect in the boys universe. Character works really well. Even the like jealousy between Sam and the other guy for her affection, I thought was done to pretty strong effect as well. The Sam character otherwise, I thought was pretty lost, pretty to the side. Nothing too great apart from that stuff. I liked in the early beginning too. I love I think it's episode 1 or 2, the frat house, the concept of a frat house at a soup college, and just the sight gags and physical comedy you get out of that. I thought that was really funny. Seeing the soup pledges and stuff too. I enjoyed that kind of stuff. Reminds me of Monsters University from Pixar. And season 2 continued to enrich this as like a really connected piece of the boys universe. Of course, we remember what happened at the end of the season 1 of Gen V, where Homelander, massacres people at the school. I wasn't necessarily expecting Homelander to show up again in this finale, despite us seeing him calling Sister Sage on her phone. But we still saw Sister Sage, understanding that she was in cahoots with Godolkin, understanding his machinations and his true identity and all of that. That was interesting. Of course, in the beginning, we see Starlight, see her in the finale as well, alongside A-Train. Bit of a surprise appearance from Giancarlo Esposito's Stan Edgar, the former leader of Vought, in the penultimate episode as well. And then where the finale leaves us, where we have definitely left God U. I think we're not going back to the school if there happens to be a Gen V Season 3. Instead, all of our core crew, really in the entirety of the crew, right, they're all joining up with that resistance, right? The anti-Vought resistance, the anti-Homelander rebels. And that's cool. We just got a lot of characters that we've come to know quite well, now brought directly into the boys for that final season. I'll be curious to what degree they have up to play in that final season, because they are the stars of the other show. So like we have to expect that the boys' final season will still be led by, Jack Quaid and Carl Urban and Anthony Starr, right? We're not going to see a ton of the Gen V folks, but hopefully we see a good amount of them, because it feels like they've really earned this melding of the two shows. And honestly, like the way the show was paced and the way the plot worked, I mean, you wouldn't really know that they had to rewrite and reconstruct a lot of that storytelling on the part of course, Chance Perdomo's, surprise, shocking death, before production kicked off. And as a result, you see his loss as a looming aspect of a lot of the show, particularly in the beginning. But I really enjoyed the conversation between Polarity, Andre's father, and also the non-possessed version of Cypher, Image Linklater. I enjoyed that scene they had about Andre right before Black Noir shows up. But in general, you get a lot of Polarity. And I think they managed to actually kind of land that plane with that character. I wasn't necessarily vibing with it in the beginning, but I think that also kind of came together and worked out as him kind of being the fall guy in a sense, remaining back at the school while everyone else gets to escape. But yeah, I'm excited for the future of these characters, and that's independent of the boys' finale. I would not be shocked if maybe they make a new show, they make a new season of Gen V post the boys. Not really sure. We do know they're making that Boys Mexico series, although that is still in the pilot phase, so no guarantees they actually make that show. We'll see. But yeah, looking forward to boys finale next year. Let me know what you're most excited to see in that, as well as Gen V. And for more TV reviews, subscribe, and I'll see you next time. What's up? Welcome back to Nostalgia. Dave here with a review of A House of Dynamite, the new political thriller film from Kathryn Bigelow, out now on Netflix. This film, Kathryn Bigelow's first since Detroit came out way back in 2017. It's been a long time coming, and of course, while Detroit did not perform at the box office the way we hoped, Bigelow, before that, was coming off an incredible hot streak, just two absolutely unimpeachable thriller films between The Hurt Locker, which of course won Best Picture, and then Zero Dark 30. Needless to say, Bigelow returning to another political thriller film with A House of Dynamite is pretty exciting. This film premiered back in Venice earlier this year and is out now on Netflix, which is disappointing because this film is absolutely gorgeous, and the way Bigelow can hold tension, the way she can construct a thriller film, this is clearly the type of film that would perform even better in the theater experience. Nonetheless, just happy we got it, happy she got another movie made. Again, the long wait here is quite disappointing. Overall, I liked Catherine Bigelow's A House of Dynamite quite a bit, but I do think its polarizing ending prevents it from being great. Showing how the US government reacts when a missile strike is headed for the continental US is a great premise for a thriller film, and the tension is built up immediately in A House of Dynamite, as we come to expect from most Bigelow films. You have a deep ensemble cast across the government and military here. Famous faces, Idris Elba, Rebecca Ferguson, Jared Harris, the list goes on, showing us various different locations, including the Situation Room. The film does a great job at building its anticipation, giving you a sense of severity and seriousness. Perhaps most successful of all, shows you how little time there really would be to make all the various decisions and calls you'd have to make in a situation like this. On top of that, the production design, the blocking, the way the camera moves, the form is there. The problem, though, is with what the ending does and doesn't do and how the audience feels when they experience that. Structure-wise, it becomes pretty clear how House of Dynamite is going to tell its story, because its 3-act structure effectively just keeps rewinding time and giving you the same events from a different perspective, or a twist on a perspective you saw in the background. Supporting characters in scenario 1 become the lead characters of scenario 2. Some characters you only see in one of the scenarios, etc. It speaks to the scope of government and how people have roles and lanes to play and be in. That being said, after you do it 2 times and then you realize you're doing it a 3rd time, in terms of going back in time, going back to when the launch of this missile from somewhere over in the Pacific area towards the US, once that realization happens and you go through it again, that rigmarole, I think the audience is ready to learn more. And that being said, it does start off, I think, quite strongly. You have Anthony Ramos as a soldier at a Alaskan military base, which ultimately is the location of where the intercept missiles, I forget the acronym, the intercept missiles that are launched to try and take down the missile going towards the U.S. You have that location. You have Rebecca Ferguson, who is a leader in the White House Situation Room. We eventually meet other people in the military. Jared Harris is Secretary of Defense. Tracy Letts is one of the high-ranking generals or admirals in the military. Gabriel Basso is the deputy national security advisor. You have Greta Lee in the film. Jason Clarke is a Navy admiral, of course, reuniting with Bigelow following Zero Dark 30, much smaller role this time around. Idris Elba, the President of the United States. Of all those performers across the various scenarios, I think the ones that make the biggest impression are Ferguson in the Situation Room, in terms of just, communicating that tension, that personal tension. I think what the movie does so well is showing you how hard it is to stay professional and stay serious when you realize there's a 15-minute countdown until a seemingly nuclear missile destroys Chicago, especially when maybe you're Jared Harris, the Secretary of Defense, and you happen to have a daughter played by Caitlin Dever who lives in Chicago. Unsurprisingly, that guy gets pretty distracted once they spend more time with him. I like Tracy Letts. I think he's very convincing, very commanding as a general. And I think scenario 3, despite the fact that, I was pretty ready for more plot progression, when we finally see Idris Elba in person after him just being on the Zoom calls in black beforehand and hearing his voice, you see him in person and, he's at some kind of pop-up event with children and basketball. Angel Reese cameo in that scene, very reminiscent of George W. Bush when he learns about 9/11, but his decision-making, right, when he's presented with the nuclear football and has, several minutes to decide what is the response to be. He's being recommended to take a preemptive strike against America's various foes and antagonists abroad, even though they do not know the origin of this missile. And it has not yet struck Chicago, after all, but the intercept missiles have all failed, and it seemingly will. I think the concept of looking at the binder of the strike options and it being presented to him as rare, medium, and well done in terms of total destruction against your enemies, it's pretty sobering. And I think that the film does a consistent job at that, of the gravity of the situation, the seriousness of these decisions that only a few people are making, and also the almost mundane nature of how some of it works, like the technology, right? It's a lot of Zoom calls. Maybe that's not the most cinematic thing in the movie, but there's a lot of people on Zoom from all over the country and the world, right? Talking it out. You have other people trying to call in, like over in Russia, who are denying any responsibility. They can't be patched into the same phone call because they're on, different frequencies, different technological limitations in line, right? I love the scene between Gabriel Basso's, security advisor character and the Russian, premier or whoever he's talking to. I think that scene is really convincing. In general, the way they talk through about what they know and don't know works really well. I do think, though, if there's one thing that's perhaps the most unrealistic thing about how the story is communicated in the film, it would be that the U.S. almost certainly would not do a preemptive strike in that manner. You have to confer. They don't have any confirmation that the missile is in fact there. It could be a cyber attack. It could be fake on all their instruments and readings. You don't know that, and also, the concept of the second strike capability would allow you to take the first hit, and you wouldn't have to preemptively strike everyone else before you lose that ability. Like, the movie kind of presents it as some way you would lose your ability to strike back. That probably isn't actually the case. However, the movie gets to its ending, and the ending is that the movie doesn't really end. We've seen the three scenarios, and we actually have not progressed any further in the plot. We've just seen it in a few different ways. We conclude with a lot of the specific personnel being taken to Black Rock, Raven Rock, the deep bunker in the DMV area, Virginia area, and there's no realization. We don't know if the missile strike shot. We don't know anything happens. We don't know what Idris Elba's president decides to do in response. We don't know anything. We're supposed to think about it. That's how the movie ends. It's a quick fade to black type thing. And obviously the point of the film is to think about the kind of rise and re-rise of nuclear proliferation, increasing remixing and rebuilding of nuclear armaments and reserves across the globe, the US, Russia, China, elsewhere. North Korea, of course, comes up in the film. The timing of the film, the last, non-proliferation arms treaty between Russia and the US expires next year. I don't think most people here expect that to be immediately renewed. So we're coming into a time where nuclear weapons seem more pronounced, more a part of the world today than they may have a few years ago, right after the Cold War had really sapped most people's appetites for, building up those armories. That's the point of the film, to think about that and think about that severity and that gravity. And the movie does such a good job of communicating just how little time there is to react to something like this if it does happen. However, gosh, is that an unsatisfying ending? I was rocking with the movie. I was really with it. And I think it does a great job at what it's doing, but it just doesn't really end its story. And that's, again, it's besides the point. It's besides the point. The movie is still an effective thriller, but you'll almost want a sense of payoff. The movie does such a good job of getting you invested in this plot when you're not supposed to be invested in this plot. You're supposed to think about the bigger picture when you're watching the movie. So that's a polarizing thing. I think the fact this movie's on Netflix can be in front of people. People aren't sitting with it in a theater the same way. That it's almost like spreading the ability to react negatively to that ending. And I understand that, even though I think there's just a lot to it. I wouldn't call the movie like underbaked or undercooked. I think it's quite competent at everything it does do. It's just that it doesn't quite finish the job, doesn't quite land that plane. The missile doesn't strike on the audience, right? So, yeah, it's tough. I think overall, again, performances, Ferguson good, Basso really good. The smaller roles, some of them are quite small, right? You have like one conversation, like one phone call for like Greta Lee or Caitlin Dever, right? It's quite the range of ensemble, but I think it's done well in all those aspects except the ending. So if you've seen the movie, let me know what you thought of it. How did you react to the ending? I think that's kind of the first place anyone can go to when talking about the film with someone else is how they felt about its conclusion. Let me know either way. In terms of Oscars, Bigelow, of course, won Best Picture with The Hurt Locker, as we know. I don't think this is going to be an Oscar contender in the end, given the Netflix depth they have. But don't rule it out. Netflix will campaign the film. There's not an obvious acting nomination choice, given it's an ensemble film. Not everyone's in the movie to a big degree. It's all supporting parts. So it's really a best picture, best production design, best director, best screenplay, play. I think the screenplay will come under some scrutiny, again, given the ending. So I think I'm less convinced of its Oscar chances than I was before I saw the film, but don't completely rule it out. I definitely would put this ahead of, the Springsteen film, for example, in terms of Oscar contenders that have taken a hit recently. But let me know what you thought of the movie, and for more movie reviews, subscribe, and I'll see you next time. What's up? Welcome back to Nostalgia. Dave here with a review of The Mastermind, the new heist film from Kelly Reichardt starring Josh O'Connor. This film premiered back at Cannes earlier this year and is out now from Mubi. Kelly Reichardt, of course, the critically acclaimed, critic favorite director, scion of indie film, never making movies too commercial, too popular, too widely seen, but always getting a lot of critical attention, internet attention, Letterboxd favorite, etc., etc. And recently, she's been busy, of course, First Cow, and showing up her previous two films. I adored First Cow, which came out right before the pandemic kicked off in 2020. And now she's here with a film starring Josh O'Connor, which in and of itself seems pretty notable these days. Josh O'Connor's star has continued to steadily rise following his debut, his breakout on The Crown on Netflix years ago. Of course, last year he was sensational in Luca's Challengers, incredible, impeccable performance. And there's some DNA in what he does in Challengers with The Mastermind, two very different characters, but it seems to be clear that O'Connor is not afraid to play the unlikable protagonist. Kelly Reichardt's The Mastermind may be a heist film on paper, but this film is not particularly interested in the intricacies of its heist that happens in the early stages of the film. The Mastermind is much more concerned with Josh O'Connor's lead character and what motivates this man without a country, this loner figure who's very hard to pin down. While I enjoyed the film's grounded setting in the 70s, I found this film achingly methodical and slow by its conclusion. O'Connor plays such a reserved lead who speaks very little. The action in the film is very measured. It really takes his time. And these are not surprises for Kelly Reichardt films, but I found the Mastermind moved at such a glacial pace, and its more contemplative final act and a half just didn't really land with me. I think you have to go into this movie with the right expectations, because a heist film titled The Mastermind suggests something like Ocean's 11, but this is a Kelly Reichardt movie. Our lead is really anything but a mastermind. I struggled with the film in the end. I think the way it starts, the heist itself, right? I mean, this is like Western or Eastern Massachusetts, Framingham, a local small museum, limited security. Like that is our titular heist, but there's not like a true like gang together semblance to the movie. That's very brisk. There's not some like grand master plan. It's a literally like smash and grab in broad daylight type heist, and it's over and done with. And unsurprisingly, due to the sloppiness of its execution, even in a time before rapid surveillance and pre-DNA testing, all of that, it's unsurprising that the heist gets unraveled. The crimes get solved pretty quickly. You can kind of sense that that's where the movie's going to go. The movie is never really interested in that. The movie is interested in JB, Josh O'Connor's lead. And JB is husband to Terry, played by Alana Hine. They have two young boys. They live with their parents, his parents, played by Bill Camp and Hope Davis. And it's pretty clear from the get-go that JB is this unmotivated or seemingly very aloof figure. His wife goes to work every day, takes them to school. He's just, getting out of bed, just getting dressed at that time. Ostensibly, he's some kind of carpenter, some kind of craftsman, but he's in between jobs at best. But he's just so quiet. He's so not present in the lives of everyone around him, barely parenting his kids, seemingly has no spark to in his marriage at that time. What motivates him to commit such a heist, which is, of course, a secret to the rest of his family, you don't really know, because he's just not the most emotive and expressive guy. And he's also not the most, compellingly competent mastermind, as the movie might suggest. And I just have a hard time with a character like that who both can't express himself and also can't clearly express some kind of traits, some kind of abilities for us to get invested in. And I just immediately started disliking him and found everything happening to him pretty uninteresting. Like watching him have to go on the lam, abandon his family, and take a series of bus trips across the country, winding up in Cleveland and then Cincinnati, and unsurprisingly being rebuffed at nearly every turn for various reasons. It's just like, this is not that compelling to me. I just don't think it's like that deep of a statement about like some loner type person who's seeking motivation in his life and seeking purpose. Like at the end of the day, he's just kind of a low-key dimwit who didn't think through a really bad decision, and that's actually directly pointed out to him. When he does eventually meet some old friends, played by John Magaro and Gabby Hoffman, I think that scene is at least interesting because there's I think more involved conversation there. Alana Haim doesn't speak a whole lot, but carries a presence, a steeliness that makes a lot of sense in terms of how you're reading that relationship. She continues to be a intriguing acting presence as we continue to see her in more and more roles. This is probably one of, if not her most notable role outside of her two Paul Thomas Anderson roles to date, come to think of it. Bill Camp and Hope Davis don't have a whole lot to do. They're always good and compelling, as we know. I did think the way the movie concluded was a bit creative and interesting. I liked the way that ended. I liked the way that story came to its conclusion. Very fitting for the film's setting, and they kind of lay the groundwork for something like that happening early on with kind of background noise and broadcasts and things like that. So I think the ending is fine, but just that really middle section of the movie just doesn't really work for me. And I think this movie gets really stuck in low gear, really gets stuck in the mud in terms of having a plot progression that interests you, because the character to me was not interesting the entire time. So I struggle with The Mastermind. I'm so happy I saw it. The craft, of course, is there. I love a period film like this too. I think there's pieces that I like, and Josh O'Connor, again, I find him a very compelling lead. This is a unlikable figure, a la his Challengers character. It's just in Challengers he was a lot more charismatic and a lot more showy, and that was just a lot more fun to watch. Let me know though, what'd you think of The Mastermind? If you like this movie, if there's things you appreciated about it, let me know what they were. And for more movie reviews, subscribe. I'll see you next time. What's up? Welcome back to Nostalgia. Dave here with a review of Springsteen, Deliver Me From Nowhere, the new Bruce Springsteen musical biopic drama film from Scott Cooper, starring Jeremy Allen White as Bruce Springsteen, also featuring Jeremy Strong as Springsteen's longtime manager, John Landau. Deliver Me From Nowhere, of course, this is the latest in the long recent history of music biopic films. We've talked about them a lot because they, in and of themselves, are a genre. Within just the last year, of course, we had the really strong hit that was A Complete Unknown, the Bob Dylan Timothy Chalamet film. We also had the noted non-hit that was the Robbie Williams Better Man film. That was quite ambitious in its own regard. And of course, next year we have the oft-delayed, polarizing at best Michael Jackson biopic film still to come from Antoine Fuqua. Last year we also had the Amy Winehouse biopic, Back to Black. This is a common thing because biopics for musicians are like an IP in and of themselves, it seems at this point. And doing the Bruce Springsteen biopic makes a lot of sense. And I think most people were attracted, at least interested in this as much as you can be for these type of movies, because of course it's starring Jeremy Allen White. And Jeremy Allen White, of course, long career and Shameless aside, with that Bear breakout on FX, has started to move into film roles. And he had a strong supporting role in The Iron Claw a few years ago, but now here he is as a leading man in a film playing Bruce Springsteen. Does White look a lot like young Bruce did as a 30-year-old in the 80s? Not really. But I think, with the costume design, with the atmosphere, it's convincing enough. And when Jeremy Allen White is allowed to sing in this movie, which is not as often as you might expect, he actually sounds really great and very convincing as a Bruce, copycat. That being said, Springsteen Deliver Me From Nowhere is very disappointing because the early promise of its structure immediately falls away, highlighting a specific point in time versus doing the entire come up and rise to fame in a biopic film. Good choice. Having the characters' daddy issues rear their ugly head throughout the entire runtime of the film with frequent black and white childhood flashbacks, very bad. Ultimately, the script is just very poor. There's just not enough there. We have lots of longing wide shots of Bruce looking out while music is playing, trying to communicate his early struggles and realization of his struggles with depression, but there's just not enough substance to what's being portrayed on screen, and the film should just be a lot more interesting and entertaining than it ends up being. Not that many music scenes. There's one really great recording in the studio type scene, hallmark of these type of films. It's a quiet and reserved film, and it just should be, I think, a lot more engaging. And of course, when you think about what this is specifically talking about, Bruce Springsteen has found some success touring with the E Street Band, but has not yet achieved the global superstardom that would soon follow off the success of songs like Born in the USA. This is the time where he really goes against all convention and wisdom to record his album Nebraska. Think of A Complete Unknown telling the story of Bob Dylan going electric, while Deliver Me From Nowhere is attempting to tell the story of Bruce Springsteen going folk. And while I enjoyed the, scenes between Jeremy Strong's Landau and David Krumholtz, the executive at Columbia Records, and even Landau's conversations on the phone with Jimmy Iovine, playing himself at that, I enjoyed those conversations about this is not commercial, and not doing press and not doing a tour in support of the album is wild. And I think that there's potential with those types of scenes and into highlighting the seemingly confusing logic behind doing something like this. I just don't think the movie is very convincing in communicating why Bruce needs to make these songs now, these dark and dour songs at a time when he's on the brink of, achieving this crazy fame. Bruce is just continuing to talk about needing to make the music the way it is and wanting to capture the way it sounds in the recording that he does on inferior equipment in a rental home in New Jersey, his native state. Yet it's just a lot of, I think, telling, not showing. I enjoyed the scene in the studio where he's basically arguing and getting very frustrated with the engineers, one of which is played by Mark Maron, about how he needs it to be the way it was, and they have to just do what it takes to put out the album the way he wants to make it. And very familiar cliches and tropes about, the artistic genius and the will of the artist and things like that. I think there's just not enough of that, right? The Born in the USA session sounds great, right? The way the Bohemian Rhapsody, Another One Bites the Dust creation scene works in that film, right? That scene is great, really fun. I think it's just very thin elsewhere, and a big part of the movie is supposed to be about Bruce's inability to connect and struggling to manage his increasing fame. And he has an awareness of what's happening to him, but he just can't really grapple it and certainly cannot articulate it. And when you're watching a movie with a character who can't really articulate how he's feeling and what he's thinking, that the script needs to find a way to carry that, and it just doesn't. And Odessa Young, I think, does her best playing this composite character of various girlfriends and women in Bruce's life. That character, though, it's a very one-sided relationship to how it works. Similarly, there's another female character in the movie played by Grace Gummer. Nice to see her, but she's playing John Landau's wife, and literally all she is there in the movie to do is listen to Landau talk and express this form of expository plot thinking to the audience. The scenes are rough. Stephen Graham plays Bruce Springsteen's father, both in the flashbacks and also in present day. Yes, we meet him later in present time. And I think those scenes, they just really beat you over the head. I was really, really disinterested in all of those scenes for the most part, because it's not like they're giving you anything below the surface. And the present day plotting is just so reserved the entire time. I'm not a big Bruce fan. I will admit it. Especially the Nebraska style of tune. It's not my thing. They make reference to Glory Days later on. I definitely like that song more. But I just want the movie to, communicate its characters well, and I just don't think it really does. And again, it has nothing to do with the performances. I like White. I think White's doing his best. The script just isn't really there. His singing is great when you see it. It's really just in the beginning, though. Strong, it's a performance that's kind of similar to how he did Roy Cohn in The Apprentice last year. A little bit of a different spin of the dial for that. But Strong, I think, him as a performer, his specific neuroses, they come across well, and I like the conversations he has. He's trying his best to manage Bruce, who's increasingly harder and harder to wrangle for reasons that are unclear to everyone around him. And right when I think the movie is gonna take a turn for the better, you have this scene where Bruce finally agrees to speak to a therapist of some kind and talk about how he's feeling, and he just breaks down into tears, and it's a great moment of physical acting and emotional acting from Jeremy Allen White. And then that scene fades to black and some music plays. He doesn't talk. There is none of that expression. The feeling is still never expressed to us. And it's not like I need the movie or wanted the movie to end in a super neat way. That's not how people that experience depression usually go through life. That's fine. But I just found it pretty unfulfilling. And again, I respect that it was talking about a specific period of time, the creation of Nebraska. This is based off a book. This is part of Bruce's life, nonetheless. Also, seemingly being much more interested in Bruce's internal struggles at the time, more so than the actual nuts and bolts of creating the album. All that's good on paper. I just don't think the execution is there. But I would still take a movie like this, swinging and missing, over stuff that just pretty poor Drek, like Back to Black, for example. So it is what it is. I don't think it's going to be much of an Oscar contender, despite our, initial suspicion. We knew about this movie coming out, hot off the heels of A Complete Unknown. Definitely made sense to think about the movie in that way. But I just don't think the film works well enough to make into Best Picture for sure. And just given the competition, I don't think Jeremy Allen White's going to get through with an acting nomination either. And Strong, he's just not quite as flashy this time around for a supporting nom either. So yeah, it's just not all the way there. It is what it is. Let me know though, what'd you think of Deliver Me From Nowhere? Did you like this Bruce Springsteen movie? What did you or did you not like about it? Let me know. And for more movie reviews, subscribe, and I'll see you next time. What's up? Welcome back to Nostalgia. Dave here with a review of Bugonia, the new absurdist black comedy film from Yorgos Lanthimos, starring Emma Stone and Jesse Plemons. Yorgos back with his third film in the last 3 years. His third film in the last 3 years to star or feature Emma Stone. 2 years in a row for Jesse Plemons. Yorgos, of course, one of the most successful, most celebrated international filmmakers we have these days. Of course, a regular Oscar contender in recent years. Emma Stone wins Best Actress for Poor Things. This is her fourth film with Yorgos, of course, including The Favorite as well. Plemons, this is his second. And it's just an exciting time whenever you get a Yorgos movie, because these films continue to be original creations with a specific point of view. They're definitely, at the very worst, interesting and worthy of introspection, and his high-end films are truly spectacular. It's an event, as we know. In the case of Bugonia, this is actually a kind of loose remake of the 2003 South Korean film Save the Green Planet. But Bugonia is it's a fully formed, narrative feature from last year, Kinds of Kindness. That was an anthology film. That was a film that kind of came to be while Yorgos had time to make something when Poor Things was doing all its various VFX. So he was able to make something a bit smaller during that time. Bugonia, though, is another fully formed narrative feature. And Yorgos himself has even said that he actually will now take some time away from filmmaking after being so busy, the last, 5+ years or so. Bugonia is truly excellent. Yorgos Lanthimos once again has given us a super unique and specific film with lots of ideas in it. At its core, Emma Stone playing a powerful CEO who gets kidnapped by intelligent yet crackpot and conspiracy theorists who believe she's actually an alien from space. Impeccable premise, but what the movie actually has inside of it, what it says about how people react to the world, power structures, capitalism. It's a lot of that core Yorgos DNA, and the Stone and Plemons performances at opposite ends of the spectrum. The way they come together, the way they clash, the dialogue between them is just electric stuff. There's also plenty of classic Yorgos humor here due to the absurdity of the situation you're watching unfold. And while it may be smaller in scope than Poor Things, it's definitely more focused. There's a lot to unpack with the movie, but we quickly get introduced to our two conspiracy theorists. You have Jesse Plemons playing Teddy, who's a beekeeper who works at a Amazon-esque company as a package shipper type worker, keeps bees at home, lives on kind of a dilapidated farm with his cousin Don, who's quite attached to him. They have a relationship as the rest of their family has, fallen away. It seems to be just the two of them. Don, neurodivergent on the spectrum in some way, seemingly pretty subservient to Jesse Plemons' Teddy. Teddy is very quick talker, very confident, self-assured person, very strong beliefs. And Teddy, he's come up with this plan that Don will help him with of kidnapping Emma Stone's Michelle Fuller, the CEO of this major pharmaceutical company, who also happens to actually own the business that Plemons works for. And they're doing this not on the surface because they have more grounded critiques, although those do come out, but because they actually believe that Fuller is a alien from space, an Andromedan from the Andromeda galaxy, who is tasked with the cause for the humans' lack of knowledge and lack of control, and the cause of environmental collapse, and all these various things. It's like a truly like crackpot, like left-wing eco-terrorist view. But Teddy clearly speaks up and actually talks about him kind of being like above politics, and he's even like above being an incel, intentionally chemically castrating himself so he can be so focused on all his beliefs. It's a really intense character, and when they kidnap Fuller at her home, and it's a quite intense scene where she almost escapes because she's trained in martial arts. I think the way that's filmed is awesome. But when they bring her to their own basement, and you see just how committed to their beliefs, they shave her head because they believe it's how the Andromedans communicate with each other as aliens. They lather her up in this kind of like antihistamine lotion for reasons to subdue her alien abilities. And then you watch as Emma Stone's Fuller has to come to the realization that she cannot reason with Teddy. He's so steadfast, so confident, so self-assured in his completely out there beliefs. And I think it's just a really great movie at communicating the power of conspiracy theory and spread. And she's an intelligent person. She's like reading the situation. But watching her character change as she realizes she does not have the power in the situation. She has to treat with them on their own terms in a fair way. And the back and forth they have, I mean, there's so much plot. I don't want to get into a lot of the plot progression, but I just think that there's a few scenes and some of the speeches in this movie, particularly one that Emma Stone gives towards the later part of the film, I think really powerful stuff. The dialogue in the movie is very precise, and Plemons, who in hindsight makes perfect sense in the Yorgos world, but this is really his first big role, following Kinds of Kindness last year. He's really sensational, I think, in the movie. I think there's an Oscar campaign for both of them here. I think, given that Yorgos is the Oscar favorite, Bugonia is certainly in the mix as well. It's a film that, despite being heavy stuff, right? Like there's very extreme things being talked about in the movie. Like the Yorgos absurdist humor what's so familiar, it's placed so well, and like you laugh at the hilarity of what you're seeing, by also being horrified at the same time. And I think it's a really great blend of that stuff. I want to shout out Aidan Delbus, who plays Don, Teddy's cousin. I think he does a really nice job. It's also an important supporting part. While he doesn't have as many lines as the two leads, I think he fits in well. Also, amusingly, you have the noted stand-up comedian Stavros playing a local cop who knows Teddy pretty amusingly. Yeah, man, there's other moments where maybe you stop believing some of it, perhaps, but I think it's really convincing. I love the way the film ends. There's definitely some surprises at the end. There's some things you might be thinking about, you might be wondering as you're watching the movie, and then you get the direct answers to those thoughts towards the end. But the film's overall like comment and trying to be kind of like above like the culture wars and speaking more to about the intensity of belief and what leads people to have a lack of trust and belief in anything but the communities that they've chosen to adopt. I mean, you could really, I think, interpret a lot of the film in many ways. And even on the other side, with Stone's character as this powerful, confident CEO person and what she's trying to achieve. And her comments early on about filming a diversity video and talking to her workers about they can leave at 5:30, but if you still have to work, maybe you should stay, but no pressure. Just there's I think a lot of class comment in the film. Very, very impressive. It's certainly in my top 10 films of the year right now. I would expect Oscar attention. Let me know what you thought of Bugonia. It's only in limited release right now. A handful of theaters will be expanding wide this next weekend. Let me know what you think of the film. And for more movie reviews, subscribe. And I'll see you next time. All right, that's going to do it for the pod this week. Next week, more films, specifically The Ballad of a Small Player, the new Netflix film with Colin Farrell from Edward Berger, hot off Conclave last year. Also, I'm going to see No Other Choice from Park Chan-wook very early. I'm very excited about that. A lot to get to with that one, I'm sure. Also, It Was Just an Accident. It's film season. I can't wait. Also, Star Wars Visions, Season 3 on Disney+. Very exciting. We'll see how that one goes. And, of course, 2026 Grammy nomination predictions. The Grammy noms are right around the corner, so we have to talk about who is in the mix this year. So make sure you subscribe, youtube.com/nostalgiapod, linktree.com/nostalgiapod. See links below. Get the best of 2025 Spotify playlist linked below. Let me know it's good, and I'll see you next week.